Ashish omitted perhaps to mention that he has sent this material to the Bombay High Court, to the National Human Rights Commission, and to the Minorities Commission, and perhaps also to other agencies. And since we have to rise above this notion that investigation is a strictly closed-door affair, in fact, that attitude, I think, is proving more deleterious than otherwise, even to counter terror. Mr. Habibullah, as the chairperson of the National Minorities Commission, and in several other avatars, I'd now like you to speak on the subject.
As Mr. Bhushan has mentioned, this is in fact an explosive disclosure in three very important cases of alleged terror in which the accused are actually possibly innocent and have suffered because of inadequacies in the system. Yes, as was mentioned, the National Commission on Minorities has been somewhat concerned with this kind of victimization of members of a certain community. I would reiterate before you the point that I've been making elsewhere also, that these may be members of a minority community, but they are above all Indian citizens. And we are, as Indians, whatever our community, allowing fellow Indians to be subjugated to this kind of oppression, which is a matter therefore of shame in a country, especially a country like India, which has a heritage which we hold so dear and of which we are all so proud, of convergence and working together in order to further the common interests of our people. Now, they happen to be people of a particular community. That in itself is terribly dangerous. We are not quite worthy of being citizens of this great country. And this is a terrible damage which has been inflicted. We of course can blame the police, we can of course blame the system for its inadequacies and ask for its reform and its change. But how are we now going to remedy this great damage to a psyche of a whole community that has taken place? This is something I think that we should all think in terms of working upon. Yes, the matter came to our notice really first with the fact that what had happened in the Makkah Masjid case. In the Makkah Masjid case, which the Commission went into, we found that the cases which were there against a number of people were on totally flimsy grounds. So that when the cases were actually presented to a court, they did not even mention Makkah Masjid. They were conspiracy against the state, and obviously they were thrown out by the court. There was no mention of Makkah Masjid at all in the cases that were brought before the courts in that matter. And yet, the government thought that it would get away by giving them a little loan for rehabilitation, and that's all. And the damage that was done to their lives, to their livelihoods, to their families, to their standing in society. They were looked upon as suspects, even in their own society. This is a terrible consequence of that. Because even if they are then exonerated, it goes into their biodata, the CV, that they have spent so many years in jail. Who's going to give them a job? How are they going to be reabsorbed into the system? Or are we creating a permanent terror force within our own country? A terror force of Indian citizens. Now, these are things that have to be looked at, but in Hyderabad, the government did react and was responsive. And I'm sorry to say that 3 police officers were named by the Commission, not us, but by the Commission set up by their own Minorities Commission, a commission headed by a leading lawyer of Hyderabad, himself not a Muslim, who ended up with a very sad commentary on what had happened, and he identified the 3 persons. No action was taken against those 3 persons. No action has been taken to this day. I've taken up the matter. I called upon the Chief Minister and told him about this and said surely action should be taken against those police officers. And I'm glad to see here that you've asked that action should be taken against those police officers. Because our Constitution, our laws, even the existing laws, even without the bringing in of laws like the Communal and Targeted Violence Bill, are quite adequate to deal with issues of this nature if we are only to set our minds to actually apply those laws. But we have not been applying those laws, and the result is, the consequence is, that people who are actually guilty of murder, I mean, you all know about the Hashimpura case, on the directions of the then Prime Minister of India, Mr. Rajiv Gandhi, charges of murder, Section 2302, were registered against those people who had murdered those 40 young people in Maliga, in Hashimpura. And though the cases are still continuing, and yet, even though they had these cases against them, that case, the cases against them was not even once mentioned in their ACRs. Not even once. They've got cases of murder against them. And they continue to get their promotion. They retired with all the necessary pensionary benefits. Many of them have died and moved on. And this is how we have, so naturally, as you said, sir, the question is that people feel emboldened. That yes, we are not going to be victimized. Let them even bring charges of murder against us. What's going to happen? Nothing is going to happen. So that is going to be the mindset. Then obviously we are dealing with this very dangerous situation in our own country. Mention has been made, and a lot of mention has been made, of course, about the work done by the Maharashtra ATS in this regard. We had, and when we had gone to Mumbai, Vinod, he was with me, we had gone down to Mumbai to actually look into complaints regarding Maligaon. A lot of people from Maligaon had come, people from the ATS were there, others were there. The ATS, in fact, when they arrived at their final conclusions regarding the actual accused now, they are capable of meticulous work on the basis of finding a motorcycle of which the registration and number and all had been sought to be wiped out. They were able to trace out the actual registration, the actual number of that motorcycle. On that basis, they've been able to trace the cell phone of the person who was the owner. Then working on that cell phone, they got in touch with all the people who were contacts in the cell phone and got the names of all the people who were working with those groups. And this required diligent and persuasive work, which they are quite capable of. Then why do they not do that in these cases? There is no, this could be just passed off as police incompetence. It was not incompetence. In this regard, I would also then appeal to not only the police, but also the media, to please exercise a degree of restraint in reporting such incidents when they occur. Recently, in the Hyderabad bomb blasts, immediately those people, many of those, not all, but many of those people who have been found, we actually accused in most of the blasts, had been found to have been totally innocent, had been exonerated, and the government was busy rehabilitating them, and we've been persuading them to be, were again arrested on charges of being behind the Hyderabad bomb blast, because one of them happened to be in the neighborhood when the blast took place. So of course we took that up, and of course the Hyderabad police was good enough to initially release them and report back to us. So the point is that, and in mentioning that, might I also say that, we have these commissions, we have these organizations, which are supposed to be, which are intended to be a kind of fail-safe. When people are not getting justice, they can turn to commissions like our own, and then seek to get remedial action taken at that level. But unfortunately, we are deeply constricted by the fact that obviously, when a case has got to Makoka, the commission can't start investigating into this. We can only then intervene when it's a done deal. The person has been found innocent and the courts have actually pronounced that there has been a fabricated case. Only then can we move forward. But we can certainly be greatly strengthened by the kind of work that has been done by you. And this will, I think, hopefully strengthen our work, because we have been aware, not so much in the case of the Mumbai blast, but in the case of Maligaon and other cases, airport blasts and so on, that a lot of innocent people have been languishing in prison. Getting them out has been difficult. In the Maligaon case, of course, we did work towards that direction by working with the CBI and then the NIA. It would be interesting to know when we spoke to the ATS about this at that point. He said, you see, we find that we feel that all these boys were innocent. But unfortunately now the CBI has come with a fresh charge sheet against them, and therefore it's for the CBI to now say whether they're innocent or not. So we took up the matter with the CBI. And the case was transferred from the CBI to NIA. So the case went on for a little while longer. But I'm glad that at least those young people have got bail. Hopefully, now, as a result of your efforts, the cases against them will also be withdrawn. But we have so many cases of this nature. In the DRDO, we have a young scientist who was arrested on wrongful charges. No case was brought against him. The cases were dropped before they were even brought. Was dropped before he brought. But he continues to be suspended in the DRDO. Of course, we've asked for an explanation from the DRDO. No explanation is forthcoming. Now, these are not matters which, therefore, we need to keep under the carpet. We need to keep confidential. We need to keep secret, because these are matters which concern the rights of Indian citizens. And I think it is not the duty of the National Commission of Minorities. This is, of course, we consider it our mandate, but it's also the duty of all Indian citizens to ensure the protection of the rights of their fellow citizens. We all know what happened in Pakistan. But we, in the case of Sarojit, his murder in prison, which is condemnable, but Pakistan we look upon as, you know, one sort of barbaric state in our neighborhood. These things, you mentioned the case of, he's not quite Qatil, the meaning of Qatil is I'm often called Wajahat instead of Wajahat. I do enjoy making explanations, but that is not quite my name. Wajahat means explanation. So anyway, the point that I'm trying to make is that we do owe it to our fellow citizens to try and work towards ensuring that the rights which they enjoy under our Constitution and our laws, that they enjoy, because if we allow, even for a certain section of our people, for them to be harassed in violation of the law, tomorrow it may be ourselves who will be so harassed. Thank you.
To also comment upon the fact that every time laws like TARA and POTA are brought, none of us is suggesting that terror is not a problem that can be seriously dealt with. But these legislative solutions, this abandonment of scrutiny of investigations, and in particular this fond acceptance, complacency in these safeguards like a higher official recording confessions, magisterial supervision and so on, I would like you to comment on whether you think these can any longer be considered safeguards at all, or whether these legislative devices are in fact leading to investigating agencies running amok. I'd request you to touch upon that too.
Thank you, Nitya. It's not entirely incompatible with the telltale marks of the functioning of the police in our country. Take the case of Incident A, where you round up 4 accused. You extort confessions from them. Then the police, in respect of Incident B, are given a kind of a whip or a command that you must come up with some sort of a cracking of the case. You're bound to actually satisfy public opinion, and we must look like an efficient government and an efficient police force. Now, where is the police going to find the accused if they can't really crack the case? So they have, shall we say, some stock clusters of people, one of which, of course, readily is the person who is already accused in another case, or somebody connected with a possible terror or a terrorist or a quasi-terrorist organization, and you then implicate him. But I think the most important point which we need to consider is that how is it that the trial in a case takes place and an innocent person is permitted to be charged and sentenced, while the evidence in support of his innocence is kept back by the state, consciously, deliberately, and without any regard to human life. And why is it that these persons have to belong to a certain denomination? Is it because they happen to be easy prey? Is it because that it is easy to actually associate them in a stock way, in a very characteristic way, with Lashkar-e-Taiba, with Simi, with some unlawful organization, with a view to cause terror? Now I will tell you that at least I had an opportunity to look at, as an amicus curiae in the Sohrabuddin case, I looked at FIRs which were registered in the state of Gujarat. And I saw that each FIR read the same way. That is, there was no change in the comma, there was no change in the name of the people and the place from where they came, there was no change on the dignitaries whom they wanted to attack in India, and there was no change in the structure of the FIR itself, which set me thinking that how is it possible that people of one community are getting repeatedly named in a stereotype series of FIRs. And it is indeed shocking to believe that a state doesn't own up that a man has died in its custody. For 1.5 years, the state actually did not even tell the Supreme Court. And in spite of reminders from the Supreme Court, it did not even tell that the person had died in its custody. After a report was given that they have died in custody, then comes a second phase. That is, you have to own up that he has died in a police encounter. So, strangely, the person who has caused the encounter is the person who actually files the complaint. And he says that he came here to destroy political dignitaries and was found riding on a motorcycle and is done to death. But the point is that is this the process which is expected under the law? It is, I think, seriously questionable. It is seriously condemnable. And it is not only about state A, it's about all the states. Now look at this document. This is not about Gujarat. This is about Malegaon. This is about Delhi. This is about the whole of India. Which is that part of India which is excluded from this particular document? And if, in fact, it is to be believed that the agency in one state can go to the accused persons lodged in a jail of another state, doctor the confessions, change the confessions, report to the court falsely that they are not involved in the first case, then it becomes, I think, a very serious issue of the validity and the legitimacy of the process. What is important, I think, from my standpoint as a constitutional lawyer is that a state which exercises powers of police and investigation, it loses all moral legitimacy if this is actually the quality of its police investigation. It's a question not only of legal legitimacy. The purpose of law is not actually to frame people, and much less frame people because they are in a vulnerable position. We must also understand what Ashish has mentioned here about the class of people who have been targeted. It's not only the denomination, but they belong to the weaker sections of the community, who obviously cannot stand up for themselves, who can't even possibly engage the services of a lawyer. And one wonders, when one looks at this document, where are those lawyers called the public prosecutors? What is their job? What are they doing? And above all, it is, I think, baffling that if you have three agencies, one is the state police, the second is the acclaimed institution called the CBI, And third, a still larger, shall I say, godly-like omnibus called the NIA, I think we don't know which one to believe. And it's clear that as a result of this report, none of them look believable. Which one of these three agencies is going to inspire confidence? And they're all made up of police officers. Let's understand that no police organization betrays really clearly another police organization effectively. It is not in their mutual interest. It is actually against national interest to betray, one another. And I think their sense of bonding is so strong that that is why the state never wakes up. Now, it is impossible to believe that you have a National Human Rights Commission, and I don't know what steps have been taken by that commission. At least I'm happy to see that there is a Minorities Commission and its chairman is available in the public space to speak about it. But I would like to say that this indeed strengthens one's suspicions about the way in which the police is ordered to conduct an investigation. I would like to disagree with Mr. Shanti Bhushan to the extent he thinks that it is perhaps not competent. I want to tell you, with my experience, the police in this country is far sharper, far cleverer, far more intelligent, far more capable than you will ever give it credit for. When they want to find, yes, I didn't say yes. What you meant was about corruption. But I want to mention this, that if the police sets its mind, they can always find the accused. If the police sets its mind, they can discover the evidence if it is truly exculpatory. And the fact that they go about charging the wrong people suggests that possibly they know who the real culprits are. They know very well who are the people behind these blasts. And this is a smokescreen, and you therefore go through a process of actually satisfying public expectations of performance, and at the same time you screen away the real offenders from justice. Thirdly, you take recourse to this kind of methods of doctoring records and confessions. I'm very happy at one thing at what Ashish has done, which is what makes it remarkable. He has got the interrogation reports, because usually very few prosecutors go through interrogation records, and they must, because they must be satisfied that the interrogation record should be able to tell a conscientious prosecutor whether this is an Ori investigation, is it being dictated by somebody, or is there someone who is being wrongly framed. You can get the first sense of it by many of these interrogation reports. Now, when you have internal records which suggest chronicling of events, dates, material on the basis of which they are being prosecuted and which they are being brought to court, you have a very good idea of what is the material which has been collected by the police. But to ask people to become approvers, this is a second ploy which Mr. Shanti Bhushan also referred, is one of these silent alleys through which you're able to bolster a completely hopeless case. So the result is there is no commitment by the police to actually discover the truth. That fundamental commitment is absent. If that fundamental commitment is absent, you are going to find only a vitiated process. And I agree with Mr. Shanti Bhushan that being in a free country, our lives cannot be left to completely fortuitous, shall I say, chances of justice. I think a lot more is required in terms of the purity of the investigation. But I also need to add that the safeguards which the so-called anti-terror laws have provided are, I think, completely useless. They're totally useless. I don't think that there is adequate verification which is done by judicial officers, and I don't think it is substantially satisfying. To be able to come to a conclusion whether a confession has been made voluntarily, and whether the components of the confession are natural, whether they are trustworthy, requires a lot more training of the judicial officers. And unless the judicial officer is very serious, and unless he has a good idea of how the investigation has proceeded in a particular case, he may not be able to really find out whether it is a confession which has been made voluntarily. In any event, having seen the track record, I think these confessions which are made to police officers are prima facie capable of being disregarded. They don't actually inspire confidence. But the last point which I think I need to make is this, that this is not simply about the police. I don't think we should look at this simply in the context of police and terror. By the way, I personally think that terror is only a name and an appellation. And I think we should not overplay on this appellation. I don't think it certainly calls for anything called counter, much less what is called a counter-terror movement. I think it's completely a bogey. It's a means to get, shall we say, more budgetary allocations for greater acquisitions of weaponry, which I think again fall into wrong hands. So I don't think that we need to feel, while of course any act of terror is something which is going to be, which is going to strike at the basic root of democracy, but I think we have to look at the substance of a crime and the way in which the substance of a crime is investigated in accordance with constitutional principles without any slant or bias against a community is most important. And I think the confidence of people, of all citizens in the Constitution will be rudely shaken, will be completely shattered if indeed this particular document is not resolved. This document, according to me, is a case which calls for resolution. It needs to be explored. It needs to be thoroughly investigated. That how is it that you have three sets of blasts? How is it you have three different versions? How is it that the versions contradict each other in the most material terms and particulars? Obviously, if you have contradictory versions, and let's understand this, that while the organizations of the police, the ATS, may have a different nomenclature, the CBI has a different nomenclature, the NIA has another nomenclature, but ultimately all of them constitute the state. They all have to collectively take responsibility. And indeed, this is, I think, a telltale evidence of the fact that these investigations are not being conducted bona fide. And if these are not being conducted bona fide, why are they being conducted against persons belonging to a community who are placed in a frail and vulnerable position is indeed a serious issue which needs to be considered in public space. And I think what Ashish has brought out is prima facie a very serious breach of constitutional governance. And I think it is not something which only is confined to what one would call as the inadequacies of the police system. While one cannot condemn and, shall I say, tar all members of a police force, which is not the intention of this document. What is the intention of this document is that why is it that you have a process called investigation under law in important cases of terror being conducted in this fashion, which is not simply slipshod. The point to be noted is this is not about slipshod investigation. This is about investigation which is deliberately calculated to mislead and thwart the cause of justice. And any state, irrespective of the political dispensation, of whatever it be, wherever it be, I think is certainly accountable to the people. And I think this particular expose of Ashish Khetan not only deserves a certain degree of, shall I say, admiration, because nobody could have gathered this material without putting his life at some degree of risk. But I think it's important that this must be put right under the nose of the government. And the government of the day, whoever it be, must be called upon to answer and explain to people that how is it that these investigations are all coinciding and are being permitted to coexist with each other in a free and democratic country. For me, the importance of this entire exercise of Ashish is that these are the stories he has actually unearthed. How many stories are there which have not been unearthed?
Millions of cases.
And if we are to believe that this is an exemplar, then I think it's a very serious crisis of confidence. And confidence is not the vote of confidence in Parliament. I think the real confidence which needs to be gained is of credibility in terms of public opinion, of acting according to the Constitution without bias against any community in a completely religious, and shall I say, in a completely asymmetric manner, so that you're able to render justice to all people. And I must also add that whatever may be the attempts on the part of the state to rehabilitate and compensate innocent victims, I think the damage which is done is actually incapable of being compensated. I think it's far more serious than that. And if a system permits this transgression, I think it is far too serious to be ignored. I would therefore join Mr. Shanti Bhushan and say that whoever is responsible for administering the governance of this country is, I think, duty-bound and owes all of us, everyone in this country, every member of our society, an explanation.